February 6 to accept the offer, which would require them to leave by September. The Office of Personnel Management says those who accept will not be required to work and will be exempt from Trump's return to office mandate. However, the administration has warned that layoffs could follow those who stay. Critics, including labor unions and Democratic lawmakers, have condemned the move, calling it a political purge with potential risks to government operations. The White House, however, argues the plan could save up to $100 billion. Meanwhile, Trump has signed an executive order restricting gender-related medical treatments for minors, a move expected to face legal challenges. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Attention everyone! The Office of the Prime Minister Communications has launched a brand new WhatsApp channel designed to keep you informed and connected like never before. Get real-time updates, breaking news, and important information directly from the source. With our WhatsApp channel, you'll always know what's happening when it's happening. Joining is easy. Use your phone camera, scan this QR code, tap follow, and that's it. You're in. Be sure to tap the notification bell to never miss an update. Stay informed, stay empowered. Join the conversation with the Office of the Prime Minister Communications WhatsApp channel today.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say, we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, so here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
WESN.
It's happened again. And now the question remains, what's going to be done about it, if anything at all? And you might be wondering, Sean, what are you talking about? Because there are a lot of things that happen in TNT, and there are a lot of things that happen again. And you will probably assume I'm speaking about something negative. And to me, this is one of the most negative things that exists in the news cycle. And yet I do wonder if it's being given the attention that it deserves. Or perhaps there's some unspoken, unwritten understanding by most of the parties involved. I would not be privy to it because I'm speculating on it. So if I knew that it exists, I wouldn't have to speculate. Some undisclosed, hidden understanding, consensus that it's not that important. Because there's funny business going on there, so we'll just let them sort it out. Kind of like gangsters killing gangsters, right? Kind of like that. Because gangsters killing gangsters could be applied beyond just the literal meaning, and then to also include anyone who also is involved in some sort of capacity, that sort of thing. Because a fourth attack happened against a prison officer, and if you add that to the attack on the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons and others that we've seen throughout the years, I would just like to know, since when is it open season on prison officers? And how, as a society, it seems as though we have allowed this to stand because I've yet to see any sort of pivot. And the thing is, it's not like I think prison officers are some sacred cow and we need to wrap them up in bubble wrap and put them in a safe and throw away the key so that nothing could harm them, because that sort of solution will probably be worse than the actual problem itself. But at the same time, nothing, because if it could happen to them, then what about the rest of us? Because this time, a prison officer's vehicle was firebombed. Now, the interesting part about this is that I assume they would have realized it would have been an empty car. So this was more of a message than an actual "we want to kill you" attack. And perhaps that's what the other incidents were. You shot up a house, you weren't necessarily aiming at anybody. Granted, it's more likely in a situation like that where you could randomly hit someone in the house and hurt someone, as opposed to, well, assuming the car is not tinted to the point where it's blackout on all sides, including the windscreen. You know what you're doing, you're just destroying the car, which is significantly more damage, technically, than shooting up a house, assuming you don't hit anybody. So now, to be fair to the Prison Association, they want more security, more safety measures. My only issue is, the flip side to that is, I said, why haven't we done anything about it? That doesn't necessarily mean security measures, right? Because the fact of the matter is, one of the ways to deal with a problem is to go to the root, not just to try to block it at the eventual outcome, but to go to the root and deal with it at the source, which I would think would be a bright idea, because we all know the saying, you give them an inch, they take a mile. Human nature, right? And we've seen that play out in criminal activity. So why? Why do we think it's going to limit itself to prison officers? If the response is not sufficient enough, and we've seen what happened when the response to murder isn't generally sufficient enough. People think they could still commit murders during a state of emergency, declared to prevent violence. So, why do we think that this could not further embolden criminals to be more brazen? Now, back to what the association wants, security measures. That's nice. Please explain to me. Now, granted, there may be some procedural and security measures that could be done, some of the things internal to the prison. But please explain to me exactly what do you want the Minister of National Security to do to secure your home and your belongings and your families that would be effective. Because yes, in theory, you could put 4 police officers to surround your house, but I'm pretty sure we don't have enough police officers for that. So what was supposed to happen is the crime fighting of the criminal justice system would ensure that things like this don't happen. But of course, that's not really the reality that we face. So unless we find some secret source that we couldn't find before, that's not a solution. Trying to put more security around the prison officers on a practical level is not going to help. Think about all of the security measures that the police advise us to do in our day-to-day lives. It's not about being a hardened target to make it impossible. It's about being a secure enough target to make it unfeasible. Because usually what are we concerned about? Home invasions, robberies, and the like. But if you have a criminal organization that wants to get to you, unless you stay in a fort for the rest of your life, or unless the criminals are apprehended, what are you going to do? That's why protective custody, you don't have a 9-to-5 job in protective custody. That one Dolce, the witness, decided, nah, he not staying in the base camp. And he ended up. So, what do you want the state to do? To just give you FULs? Well, again, there was a police officer who, he drew his gun with the criminal pointing a weapon at him. And he essentially lost the gunfight, and fortunately, the people sitting in close proximity to him were not hit. And that's when the criminal was not looking to attack him. but just rob the establishment they were in. How is a gun going to protect you if you're taken by surprise and it's still in its holster and you're shot? In fact, yes, sometimes you have the opportunity to return fire, but not in all cases. With prison officers, we've seen it already. If they drive by you before you could react, you get hit, then the gun on your waist doesn't help. That's not a solution. And my thing is, at the end of the day, one of the issues I have with any sort of debate is when one side demands something is done, but they have no idea what to do about it because they don't actually give besides less than practical solutions or low-hanging fruit solutions that might seem obvious, but then if you work out the details, there are a lot of kinks to work out at best, or it's totally impractical at worst. What is being offered? Now, here's a solution that we've seen in Latin American countries. Prison officers wear ski masks or balaclavas. They don't have anything to identify them. They wear full body suits, right? They operate under a condition of anonymity. To some extent, that's part of the reason why certain police officers wear certain tactical gear when out, maybe not in this jurisdiction, maybe in this jurisdiction, but in multiple jurisdictions, so that their identity is concealed when out on operations. That's one thing that could be done, because then if the inmates don't know which guard is doing what. Now, to what extent will that be fully effective, I don't know, right? Because once you've revealed your identity to them, they might be able to make out your build and your height and your whatever, and your mannerisms and your speaking and what have you. But that just goes to point to the fact that perhaps our prison service is operating under protocols that are severely outdated based on the challenges that we see today. We're not hearing anything about that, which is not to say that that should be the only thing under consideration. Don't get me wrong. To some extent, yes, the external security and the processes for security, there are probably protocols and procedures that could be implemented to help beef things up, even if it's of a marginal improvement. When you're talking about human life, marginal improvements might be the difference between life and death. But to say that they're going to solve the problem completely, but more importantly, it's nice. You see, whenever anybody demands something from the government and say, fix it now, and they don't have any actual practical solutions behind it, it's questionable even if they want it to be fixed. It's a trap, essentially. It's an emotional trap to say, they're not fixing it. See, I told them to fix it, they're not fixing it. Meanwhile, the government sometimes, maybe not the politicians, but the technocrats behind the scenes are racking their brains like, well, how are we supposed to fix this? How are we supposed to fix this? Because the problem is bigger than the immediate concern that the accuser is presenting in the public sphere. Because according to the Prison Association, the government has a magic wand to fix their safety and security. But here's where the disconnect comes. Think about it. If anybody in the public thinks the Prison Service Association is right, the government should do something about this, dare I ask you, why are you expecting the state to be able to wave a magic wand to solve this security issue when the overall crime problem has yet to be solved in any meaningful or practical way? Because if they had a magic wand, they would have done it from the beginning to prevent the murder rate from getting to 600 and beyond. But they don't have it because the situation and the problem is not that simple. Now, if you want to argue that perhaps other leaders might make better decisions and might have better ideas, that's a different story. But granted, it's not as though we have people coming again. Who is the alternative giving us the alternative solution? And look, the alternative solution right now is, again, just give us FULs. Just give the population FULs. So the prison service saying, give us FULs. The opposition saying, give the population FULs. And I'm saying, if violence comes at our door, and FUL is a last line of defense, not a solution. And even then, you could lose the gunfight. If a trained police officer, one would hope that he did practice on the range and is certified on an annual basis. But a police officer that should be trained is going to lose a gunfight that he opts into. Who's the rest of us? Who's the rest of us? So this whole discussion is somewhat frustrating because there's little practical value of where it is right now. And it's not to say that the government is offering us anything. And this is why I say, is it that people just, we don't want to talk about it? Because on one hand, yes, not all prison officers are corrupt, not all prison officers are bad, and we do need to be concerned about their safety because we need people to do that job. And hopefully we want to attract more good people to do that job well. And that's not going to happen if they're dropping like flies. But then on top of it, they are agents of the states. If they are easy targets for criminals and they face no reprisals, legal reprisals, then the system is completely broken and it's only a matter of time before it breaks down further and the effect on the rest of us increases. Because that's essentially how it works. Criminal justice system, as a preventative measure, shows cracks. The criminals kind of squeeze through those cracks, and then it slowly turns into a wider and wider hole until all of a sudden, the people who are affected, before the crack, it only affected a few people. Now, it's a bigger and bigger hole that's affecting more people. And then it gets a wide open, gaping chasm. And then you try to plug it with a state of emergency, and to some extent it's working, and to some extent it's not. Because a state of emergency is, as much as you try to modify it, it's not really rebuilding your criminal justice system, it's just an artificial plug that doesn't fit perfectly into the gaping hole that's been left to be forced open by the deluge of criminal activity, unfettered by any real substantial crime-fighting system, holistically. All right, there were some other topics that I want to touch on, but this thing, which is just one level of the violence in our society, it bothers me how untouched it is with regards to any sort of serious discourse. Because the association itself ain't really offering us much, but the sad part is no one else is speaking about it as far as I can see. So what are we going to do about it? Or are we just going to leave them to fend for themselves? It's one thing to say we're going to leave the gangsters to fend for themselves. We're going to leave the prison service just fend for itself. Granted, yes, they're bad apples, but is that a solution for the long run? I don't think so. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll go into the meat of the matter for today's show with the Daily Review. Stay tuned. This is Talking About a WESN. I'm sure Michael Small. We'll be right back.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
It's not our differences that divide us, it's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. That's an interesting quote. And there's a situation that happened recently that I actually find interesting. Dare I say, there's this stupid, silly, immature child in me that will say it's a little entertaining, but at the same time, this is serious business, so we shouldn't really think of it in those terms. What am I speaking about? Well, let's kick off today's Daily Review. So, there was a sod-turning ceremony at the Goldsboro Water Treatment Plant in Tobago yesterday, where multiple government ministers and one deputy chief secretary, who was at least one representative from the THA, the other one I believe was Kelvin Morris, were present at the sod-turning ceremony. And at the ceremony there were 4 government ministers and the deputy chief sec. They had shovels to turn the sod. It was, by all accounts, a great occasion, in part because, and again, I would like to reiterate the appreciation, I think, that some of the population, maybe not all, has of the current efforts to increase water supply in the country, done by WASA, WASA praised by the minister, and to some extent, one would imagine, he is probably doing the job that a minister should. Some people might say, well, oh, it's not that great, right? All right, let's just kind of put in reality. He is doing the job a minister is doing because we're seeing the public utility on him at least doing something. This is, of course, is Minister Marvin Gonzalez. Now, the situation with that happened was a very interesting one because I will give my speculations as to why I think it happened maybe after. But essentially, what happened was the Deputy Chief Secretary decided to call out the government saying, well, you don't really invite us to things. I hope this is not the last time. In fact, she said, I sincerely hope that this kind of collaboration, one where I'm invited to be part of the celebration, is not just happening because we were forced to do it. And then further clarified to say, in other words, I am looking for other invitations. Now, a couple of the other cabinet ministers did, fire back. Ayanna Webster-Roy, she said that she asked that the same passion that would have been shared when we were debating the 2 autonomy bills. She wished that same passion would have been shared then. Planning Minister Penelope Beckles, she also said, things will never be perfect because very often the impression is given that all the money is spent in Trinidad. Come to Arena and they will not say so. Go to Lopino and they will not say so. Which is a very reasonable complaint that a significant amount of the poorer areas, I apologize for the term, but it's just the quickest, easiest thing to say in the moment. The poorer areas in Trinidad will basically look at Tobago and say, what are you complaining about? We have the same complaints. You're not special. This is an equal country, right? Okay. And to be fair, even Port of Spain, when you think about it, depending on the potholes in Port of Spain and the capacity of flooding and the inaction to enact any sort of, because the problem is when Port of Spain floods, potentially you have a significant fraction of the population stuck in there. And that's kind of not good, right? A community of 10,000 flooding out, that's bad. A city that might have 60 to 100,000 people stuck in there and they don't all live there, that's also bad, right? And it's not like we're seeing any special consideration given to that. But I digress. Now, Minister Gonzalez in particular, he clapped back saying he was never invited to any THA functions, right? But then he went on to say, I'm not about that. I'm a big man. I have work to do. I'm not about making an issue over who gets an invitation, who doesn't. I'm about serving the people, right? Now, to some extent, I do wish he didn't go as far as he did, because then he went on to say, watch them. This is about politicians trying to score points. off of issues. Watch them carefully, how they conduct themselves when you put your trust in them. Ask them to account for what they have done, especially those who promise to fix things and are only fixing themselves. But then this part, I think, he went on further. This part might be a bit more pertinent to the matter at hand. He said he will forgive her, meaning the Deputy Chief Sec, because perhaps she wasn't aware that on many occasions, when we commissioned booster stations and infrastructure, the secretary responsible for utilities, that is the THA Secretary, Ian Pollard, refused to attend. Now, and then, you know, he had more things to say about politicizing water supply and stuff like that, which I understand. Now, the thing is, I think this is a situation, and now I'll go to where I will express what I will speculate the motivations for Faith Brebner, formerly Bezrel. My mistake if I mentioned that earlier. Dr. Faith Brebner, why she took the stance that she did earlier. Because I get it. Even myself has to do slightly similar considerations. Because if I take a strong stance against a politician today, it's not like I could be buddy-buddy with them tomorrow, right? So now, here is the Deputy Chief Secretary coming to a sword-turning ceremony. To what extent is she supposed to just play nice and turn the sword and smile and shake everybody's hands and sing Kumbaya and be one big happy family? And to what extent is she supposed to acknowledge the ongoing reality as they, the THA, present it? Right, in order to be consistent with their messaging. I'm not saying that she's right or she's wrong. I'm just saying the THA has a certain message, a certain public message that it gives out. So the last thing she could do is, in the halls of the THA, be part of an entity, of a political organization, and an executive that complains about what's going on, the PNM versus Tobago, and how they mistreat Tobago, whether it's the Tobago Council, central government, what have you, and then attend a sword-turning ceremony where she's smiling, and the minority leader, at least at one point, is standing next to her, and various cabinet ministers are there, and they all have shovels, and they're all smiling, and what sort of message does that send out? That said, do I think that both sides handled this as best as they could? No. Ironically, this is also one of those instances where I think a more diplomatic approach would have been warranted. Something like how Lady Simler addressed verbally the Auditor General case, not even as much going so far as the written judgment, but how she addressed her concerns or displeasure in a subtle manner that got the point across without being insulting. Because to some extent, even Minister Gonzalez, who I think has good leadership qualities and at times displays that in his communication style, he could have been more diplomatic and he could have taken a higher road and still potentially express himself in a practical way, the pertinent things that he said. Right? To some extent, the warning about politicians to warn the public, watch how certain politicians conduct themselves. That level of passive aggressiveness may have been a little too far. In the context of, we've seen this kind of thing before from politicians with worse communication skills. So because of that, I would have hoped that Minister Gonzalez would not have necessarily gone that far and done the typical, even though it is within potentially the realm of acceptability. But I get it. I guess Dr. Bezrel is in a situation where, you know, because if she sings Kumbaya, she is potentially giving the cabinet a kind of she's rubber stamping this. And ironically, multiple times I say politicians don't think about things in the long run. Well, this is one of those things. You can't present two different directions with regards to your messaging and in the long run expect people to appreciate you because you're going to be inconsistent. The trick is, how do you deconflict those things without escalating things unnecessarily? Because I do think, and to be fair to Dr. Brebner's credit, when they came into power, she did say on this show that the communication with government, central government and the THA wasn't bad. It was good, right? But then, of course, now you have the practical reality of how the country's been run, good or bad. And of course, for the THA, with regards to Tobago, they have to try to push against the bad. Now, one could argue it's not only the bad they're pushing against. But being combative in the ceremony, it doesn't necessarily get to a solution. And perhaps maybe, ironically, we should take Minister Gonzalez's advice, but not in the way that he expected. We should take it in the sense of, we should look at how politicians conduct themselves in ceremonies like this, in public relation things, not just the THA, but across the board, to see exactly what the message is for, who they're messaging. All of their press releases, when they show anger or sadness or joy, who is that for? What is the target for that? To what extent is this part of the machine and calculated, and to what extent is this genuine? Now, I can't say that I know if Dr. Brebner was genuine or calculated in the moment. I don't. And again, there is reasonable grounds for her to be in a situation that could have genuinely upset her. Because she is from the perspective that Tobago is not being treated well, and here comes, you know, the cabinet ministers to look at us, look at what we're doing, it's all great. And what do some people say? Why are you just kind of trying to wash away or wipe away or hide away or sweep under the rug all of the bad things with this one good thing or this other one good thing? To be fair to Minister Gonzalez, his job is public utilities. And I don't know what the water situation is like for Tobago, but the point is Tobago is getting at least just as much effort, if not more, than the rest of the country. Because there are other parts of the country who probably have a lot of, I guess, complaints with their water supply as well. Now, one of the tricks with water supply is it's not just doing the work to get the water, but what part of the natural occurring environment allows for water collection, and then what's the expense of doing so. Some places will be cheaper than others. Water might be more readily available than others, more easily purified than others. There are probably a whole host of technical considerations that don't make it into the public debate. That basically, similar to the prison service, everybody just says water for all. We want water for all. Right, how do we get there? And then, that's just in a vacuum, how do we get there? But then we have to add on that the layer of somebody mismanaged the economy for the last 20 years or so, right? Or more, depending, because we don't necessarily have the investment assets that we should in our sovereign wealth fund. Now, do we say that that's just a product of this administration, the previous administration, the administration before that? How far down the line should we go with that situation? I'm not here to debate that, so I won't go there. My point is, resources are not necessarily that forthcoming. To some extent, you could blame the current administration or the one before that, etc., etc. That's not the point. The point is the Minister of Public Utilities and WASA has to work with what they have, not what they should have had, and we could then complain, because to some extent, if we sidetrack this issue with that, we're not going to solve this issue of water supply. What could have been? Oh my gosh, what could have? Yes, I understand. We should hold the people responsible to account. Part of that is perhaps demanding better leadership. However that may come, an improved PNM, an improved UNC, an improved third force, whatever. But with regards to we need communities need water today, the HSF should be bigger is not going to help that debate right now. So, I started off out of the break with the quote. It is not our differences that divide us, it's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. That's what divides us. We are a twin island nation divided by what? What exactly is dividing us? Because I feel the division is going to get greater. Part of it is cultural, ironic, considering the fact that it's not like the culture is that dissimilar, right? Trinidad is not one race and Tobago is not a separate race. What is it? It's not geographical distance. It's not that far apart. One is a Caribbean island, the other one is a Southeast Asian island. What is it? To what extent is it based on perceptions? Is it based on fears? Is it based on politicians who need to find someone else to blame except themselves? And the dynamics in Tobago politics now have gotten more complicated as time has gone on, because it has changed in ways that politics in Trinidad has not. And now all of a sudden those dynamics have become more and more complex, because there's a very real question of, if the TPP wins those 2 seats, are they going to go with the PNM, a party that they have been essentially politically opposing since before its inception, or are they going, and you could have been the deciding votes to change the majority or not? What you going to do? It's a very interesting question, and I do wonder if I will be surprised pleasantly by the answer, if the question comes to pass, or disappointed, or a mixture of both. It all depends not just with what is decided, but why it's decided. And if this whole exercise of we have a sorting ceremony and we can't play nice, and I don't expect the THA to play nice, but to make a play towards a solution, not to reinforce the problem. And right now, more and more, the problem between Trinidad and Tobago is the fact that there are too many people whose words and actions, whether intentional or not, result in greater division than coming together. All right, let's do one more story in the Daily Review before we move on. This is one that I haven't gotten to for the whole week. Something I want to mention quick. I was surprised to see this coming out of last weekend, so a lot early in the week, but I kept pushing it off. The situation with the Congress of the People is still up in the air. I find this to be very interesting. Now, the interim chairman is basically saying, look, this has not been determined, right? This has not been finished. But that also, I believe, one of the other members, one of the founding members, is calling to question the fact that well, this is the thing. We're not even too sure exactly who declared it, because on a technical level, yes, we know the outgoing political leader had a part in declaring it, but does he have the authority to do so? I don't know. So it's self-proclaimed, and Philip Edward Alexander got a lot of ponging for what he did with the PP. So do we let Mr. Ramadan off the hook on this one? Self-proclaimed leader, because the chairman ain't saying that he's the leader. Mr. Eversley is basically saying Mr. Ramadan is having secret meetings with the UNC. But what about the Memorandum of Understanding with the NTA and HOPE? And the key point is the NTA and the UNC, they don't seem to come together. So the thing is, I'm sorry, but I don't really have much hope for the COP at this point. And for the COP, I can't help but share in some of these sentiments that other people would have. What have I said about the COP? For years, it was a missed opportunity. It was a disappointment, because they were a third party that was gaining ground with the voters. Yes, the first go around, they didn't get any seats, but they were gaining ground. If you want to be a new political party, you have to be prepared to play the long game, not look for some quick victories. And here's the thing. How did the COP become irrelevant? To some extent, they started to look like UNC2 to me. And who was the person somewhat in charge of that at the time? And now he seemingly wants to go back to the UNC. Well, if you want to go back to the UNC, join the UNC. Why is this potentially going to work better than the last time? Because the amount of, I think, some people in the COP need to understand. You're not just going to put Mr. Ramadan there and all of a sudden, you know, the clouds will part, the rains will stop, the sun will come out, and then the Garden of Eden will flourish aplenty throughout the world. And all famine and hunger and everything will be solved. No. The party became irrelevant for a reason. He stepped down for a reason. Things went in the wrong direction for a reason. And there's no short-term fix for that. Joining up with other third parties who are now trying to build themselves, at the very least, is a better, not saying it's guaranteed to be a good or even an average level, you know, break even. It's just, I'm fairly certain, it's better for your long-term prospects than trying to rejoin the UNC again. Because the UNC is a party that said, we don't need no help. Or all of a sudden need help, and they want to entertain help. That's what it is. I understand that the politics is more sinister in the background with regards to these third forces and how they engage, and listen, I get it, right? But let me go with what is being presented to the public here, because they're trying to sell us on something and I'm not buying it. More importantly, I think the chairman of the COP is right. If you don't want to follow your constitution now, then when are we going to do so, and how could we claim legitimacy? At the very least, the PNM and the UNC are, for the most part, it seems, going through the motions following the constitution. Whether or not we think they're just going through the motions or if they are genuine internal democratic processes is besides the point. We can't just outright say they're doing monkey business because they're going against the constitution. Some people might say the prime minister is skating the line or even cross the line, but regardless, we don't have a smoking gun that could cause the whole situation to collapse. But here we have the COP where, and what could have been a minor injection of life into our political conversation has already sputtered out, in my opinion. And dare I say, I'll be surprised if there's enough of the population that looks at the COP as being relevant. In fact, I hate to say this, but the outgoing political leader, his decision to step down for Mr. Ramadan might have actually been a net loss, depending on how this plays out. There's maybe still room for it to not be a negative, but I'm not too sure about that. Not too sure about that. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to switch gears. I have a couple of videos that I want to show. Apologies, Mr. Shah was not able to join me today. He wasn't able to join. He may or may not join tomorrow, but we have to see. Also, we may have ASP Ali, sorry, even I did it, retired Inspector Ali tomorrow. So we may compensate you with a packed show tomorrow. We'll see how it works out. But right now, the show must go on. I do want to add a little bit of spice on the education question, but also before that, there is something else that I want to point out as well, a change in the dynamics of a cultural, social element that perhaps we're not necessarily willing to talk about. Stay tuned, this is Talking About on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Her voice has mesmerized us for years.
And now, in a rare treat for music fans,
Shakuntala and Friends in concert, featuring Shakuntala Jang Bahadur. Singing sensation Deval Chaitlal, brilliant musician Dr. Shivanan Maharaj, master flautist and saxophonist Narendra Maharaj, with music from Shiv Sangeet Orchestra, Shakuntala and Friends in concert.
Shakuntala, Tala.
Between the Bank and the Gutter, a novel about street dwellers in Port of Spain. This is a book to make you both laugh and cry. Above all, it takes you to that special space that only street dwellers know. In this moving and riveting human interest story, Harry journeys from insanity to sanity while living on the streets of Port of Spain. Now available at Metropolitan Books, 12 Aripita Avenue, Woodbrook. Paper-based bookshop, 14 Alcazar Street, Woodbrook. WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. And the home store branches located at Barataria, Shogunas, and Eastgates Mall. Autographed copies now available on request. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh. I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People, and Closer to the Church.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And accountability is one of those things that I kind of throw that word around on everything now, right? It's like the secret sauce that I just have to have with every meal. Accountability for all. Because a lot of the issues, it might not necessarily be solely because of a lack of accountability, but I kind of see, and sometimes it's a presumption, but I think it's a reasonable one, where it seems as though, you know, we don't really see accountability taking place, right? We also don't see much transparency, but when you look at the results, you're like, oh my gosh. But then you have to ask the question, why was this allowed to go on for so long? Hence, the questions about accountability. But maybe I wasn't necessarily looking at accountability completely, in a complete manner, the way that I should. Because I found something that it kind of put accountability in a different perspective. And perhaps it's not just about what the leaders are or are not doing, but it's also we need to look at, once again, what we are or are not doing as individuals that make up society. To go into details, well, it's time to cue this.
Let's take a look. Accountability versus responsibility. What is the difference? Well, I hear this a lot. Well, when you're accountable, you're kind of responsible. It's kind of like being responsible and accountable, right? Yes, sort of, okay? The way I try to illustrate it is with a simple story. We hire people and we have responsibilities in the job descriptions. Right? So imagine I was hired to keep this room clean, all right? And in my responsibilities, they were very clear. There were 3 things that I was hired to do. 1, organize the chairs after every meeting. 2, make sure the tables are clear of everything. And 3, vacuum the floor. If I do those 3 things, I get a performance review. My manager's like, clean, organized, vacuumed. Good job, Michael. Well done. I'm doing my job. But one day, I'm going around and I plug in my vacuum and the fuse blows. Okay? Is there any place in my job description that says it's my responsibility to fix fuses? No, it is not. So am I not being responsible if my boss comes in and sees that the floor is not vacuumed? Why isn't the floor vacuumed, Michael? Well, I plugged the vacuum in, the fuse blew. Am I not being responsible? I wasn't hired to fix fuses. What I'm not being is accountable, okay? Because what would an accountable employee do if they plugged the vacuum cleaner in and the fuse blew? Yeah, call facilities, go over to facilities, find a battery-powered vacuum, get a broom, get on their hands and knees and pick up the dirt. Those are all different levels of accountability. Because this is what we look at. Responsibility, I have an obligation to act. I can measure that very easily. I hire people to be responsible for certain things. When it comes to accountability, I have an obligation to answer for an action. And guess what? I can monitor, I can reinforce, I can help you with your responsibilities. I can be clear about them, I can hold you to them. I cannot hold you to your accountability because accountability is a personal choice. You can't make somebody accountable. They have to want to be accountable.
I mean, that kind of makes it, one would think it makes everything I've said about, you know, holding people to account kind of meaningless, right? But I think the truth in what he's saying is, yes, we could hold people responsible or hold people accountable. That's semantics. That process, that exercise it is what it is, right? You didn't do your job, we'll hold you to your job, right? To whatever degree the law and HR practices and your job description and the regulations of the employer apply. But to some extent, there are times when part of the accountability equation goes beyond what you can be held responsible or accountable for. Again, think of it as semantics, right? Because what did he say? Well, if something is preventing you from doing the job, an employee that's going to be held accountable is going to do more to get the job done or to do what can be done because they want to ensure that their responsibility is met and not saying, well, it's not within my job description to do X, Y, and Z. And perhaps therein lies the problem because there are situations where management, HR, government ministers, employers in the private sector, where they can't enforce certain things, it's really up to the employee to determine if they want to do better or not in certain areas. Case in point, teaching. There are probably ways to circumvent expectations of teachers. That's why you have bad teachers and good teachers, and you can't necessarily fire some of the bad teachers who know what not to do to not get fired. So a couple of examples, one of where I think it's also about the individual accountability, because one of the things is the National Forensic DNA Data Bank. Yes, we have one of those. It's underutilized. After 6 years of operation, it's not well utilized as it should be. Efforts are being made to reduce the siloed approach and to gain buy-in from supporting agencies because a spokesperson, the deputy custodian, is saying the unit was not being used to its fullest potential. The siloed way of the Ministry of National Security operations hampers its effective use. And that term, they're siloed, doesn't necessarily come as a surprise because from what I understand, the various agencies have rivalries with each other and they're not healthy rivalries, at least to some respect. And again, part of the accountability is, yes, management could try to ensure that there are certain policies and regulations to ensure that there is collaboration where necessary, but then part of it also is the working relationship between the two. You can't necessarily dictate that because it's crossing on the boundaries of interpersonal relationship of the individuals, right? This is one of those weird things where potentially you could overstep and it might not be beneficial to do so. You can't dictate to people, hey, you, army man, and you, police officer, be friends. You in the forensic lab and you, police officer, be friends. But those who are accountable, I guess you could say, that have a personal sense of accountability, they will understand that, hey, the job is bigger than me and you and our personal differences, and we have to be professional to get the job done. To what extent do we have that? And it's not a unique issue in TNT. Do not get me wrong. It's not. It's across public, private, it's across all industries. But at the end of the day, sometimes you compare yourself abroad to say, hey, we're good or we're bad. And sometimes you say, it doesn't matter if we're better than. The question is if it's good enough. Different situations need to be judged on its own individual merits. Another one is, okay, there's improved guidelines and policies. This is from the Minister of Health. Any management on NICU management at all regional health authorities. That's nice. But some of the things, I think, that was implied by the reports that came out of that whole Northwest Regional Health Authority or Port of Spain General NICU incident is the fact that there were guidelines. Were they being followed? And now, to what extent can or should the people involved be held accountable or responsible by the authorities? And to what extent do we need to really wonder, is the culture of our workers good enough? And not just within the regional health authorities, I mean overall. Because of the approach to work, right? Funny enough, one of the more enjoyable things, I enjoy going out to eat more now. Not that I could afford to do it frequently, but I enjoy it more now. It's a shame that I can't afford to do it more frequently. Now, what makes it somewhat enjoyable is the fact that I find the places that I do go to when I can, they have good staff that know how to engage with customers and treat with customers and not, you know, offload their bad day on their customers. And sometimes it's not just restaurants, even fast food places. There are a couple of fast food places that I would love to buy from on a regular basis. It's not always convenient, right? But the level of staff there is just, and at times I go out of my way to tell them, to give them some sort of positive feedback because they deserve it. When we're not talking about no big fancy restaurant where you spending $100 and something, we're talking about $40, chicken and chips. And the staff is pleasant. Because, I mean, to some extent, how do you, and I kind of have some experience with this, how do you force someone to be pleasant? Yes, it's a customer-facing job, but this is TNT. So usually, if they don't want to be pleasant in a vacuum, you just say, you're not suited for this job, we have to let you go, and you find someone more suited for the job. But in TNT, at least traditionally, that hasn't been an option, because our labor market is very not in a healthy place for a long time. So to say now that certain places, and again, I'm not talking about the most expensive places serving the most expensive food. I'm talking about reasonable places serving reasonable food. And it's not just all foreigners being the waiters. It's locals as well. And I think to some extent they have a personal sense of accountability with how they engage. And with regards to the NICU situation, I wonder if, to what extent was that not there for some of the nurses, right? And I don't know for sure. But it didn't seem as though they were following the protocols, or if they were following protocols, they weren't really adhering to the spirit of why these things exist. It was more like, well, if anything, we'll follow the letter of. And sometimes when you follow the letter of, you still don't really meet the standards necessary to ensure that what you're trying to accomplish or achieve is accomplished or achieved. And in this case, I'm speculating, but the results of how many babies that died. Now, no one came out and said it was just a fluke. I think even the PAHO or an investigation didn't say it was just a fluke. They kind of pointed to some things. So, I do still think, even with what that gentleman said, I do still think we have to hold people to account. But holding to account, we kind of have to understand, to some extent, that's only half the battle. That's only trying to fix a situation that's already broken. right? To prevent it from being more broken and to kind of get it back up to an acceptable level. But if we want to excel, if we really want to move forward in a significant way, we need that individual sense of responsibility and accountability to be practiced by people before they need to be disciplined. Disciplining someone is only going to be enough to kind of discourage the behavior. It's not going to stop it from ever happening. And it's going to be an uphill, ongoing battle, constantly having to be reinforced. But accountable workers, those are the workers where the owners or the superiors could say, I don't have to be stressed out when so-and-so is there because they could handle it, because I could trust them. There's one last thing. I'll drop this and maybe callers could call in. With regards to the education situation, there's something that I found this morning. I'm not entirely sure if we would want to even venture down this path, but it's a very different take that I personally have never seen. Or maybe I have seen and I've forgotten because it didn't really register at the time. But it is out of left field for me. And I wanted to share this with you for consideration. Let's run the clip.
I mean, I think what we're trying to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know more about this than I do, which is we think school is one size fits all. And it's not. Because different kids have different challenges, and different areas have different challenges, and different situations have different challenges. What's the school that put washing machines in their schools because some of the kids were, weren't coming to school because they were embarrassed because their clothes were dirty. So they put washing machines in the school. That's genius to me. And I think that we can't apply this one size fits all because at the end of the day, the teachers know more than anybody else, than any politician or any administrator. The people on the ground who touch and are with the kids every single day know how to solve the problems. Like, you actually know the answers for all of these challenges. And I think we need to empower teachers. We need to give authority to teachers. Right? The way we do it is we ask the teachers to give us the information up high so that we can have all the authority. But the answer is no. You don't push information up, you push authority down. And I think if we empower teachers to teach the way they think is the right way to teach their children in this situation, I think a lot of that just goes away. I think a lot of those become symptoms.
Now, if you've listened to what he just said, do you think that could apply here? Not getting into the whole rigmarole, but this whole situation about lessons, private lessons after school because teachers won't teach during school. I have seen that done in a private school, first of all. So let's not try to pretend that this problem doesn't exist. It happens in public schools. Because I have seen it gone so far as to happen in a private school where someone who was paid privately to teach did not teach blatantly and was allowed by the institution to give lessons and to charge for lessons, going late into the afternoon. So if such an extreme example could exist, and I doubt it's the only one, in private institutions, it could happen publicly. So in our circumstance, do we give teachers more authority? Because to link it back to the first video, one could argue, these are teachers that have very little sense of personal accountability or responsibility. They're taking advantage of. But at least in the example of private schools, you are potentially taking advantage of people who you assume could afford it. Some private school students, they are there because their parents struggle to afford it and scrape together enough money to send their kids there. So let's not assume all private school students are rich. Now, what about the public school students? Right? How many of them can afford lessons? So this is a controversial thing that is merely but one symptom of why the education system needs to be fixed. Now, this gentleman's suggestion in a vacuum is not as crazy as you would think. One of the interesting things, first of all, military and paramilitary organizations utilize business administration and human resource management just like any other private entity. One of the things that they do is they actually do, to some extent, at least in Western militaries, certain Western militaries, push responsibility down. Not always, not perfectly, but to some extent, the responsibility of certain things, when things are working well traditionally, are pushed downward because the people in the lower ranks are the people out in the field. And an armchair general in headquarters trying to tell soldiers who to shoot at is a very inefficient way to conduct fighting. Why do I bring that up? Well, you see that in various examples in the private sector of when central control does not work, when corporate policy does not work, right? When the corporate policy is all of our restaurants are to run a certain way, but even in a singular brand, what one community would want and demand, and where one restaurant of one community might sell out on certain things, a different community would sell out on different things because the tastes are different, the preferences are different, potentially the socioeconomic bracket differences could also impact sales, which items are more popular or not. But corporate will make decisions aggregate, and it's not always healthy for the stores that their customer base are the exceptions to what is the usual trends, what is the common things that is noticed through most restaurants, but not all. So this thing about giving more authority to people on the ground, it makes sense in a vacuum, except those people have to be accountable. They have to have a sense of responsibility to do the job the best they can, and we do have teachers that can do that. We do have teachers that could do that, do not get me wrong. But like anything, whether you're promoting people up or you are giving them more responsibility on the ground, in the field, at the lower levels of the organization, you have to know who you're giving that to, because if you give it to the wrong person, things might bust. But I do think that, to some extent, this suggestion is interesting, because one of the things we rarely hear from, and this could be because, at least in the public sector, private teachers can't necessarily speak about the public education system, right? Maybe they could speak about the curriculum as they've seen it, and some of the things with the exams and how those things have changed. And I've consulted with one or two private teachers in the primary level. But with regards to wider issues of the public sector teaching and schools, well, do we hear from the teachers about what they need in their specific situation? The video said about a school where the school decided to get washing machines in the schools for the students. They could wash their clothes in the school so that they would have clean clothes to come to school. That's a unique solution. I don't really think that's something that is applicable everywhere. But my point is, for each individual school, who is the spokesperson? Who is the advocate? And is that person being heard? And to what extent are considerations like that, and it don't have to be that minute and drill down to that level of detail, but the people who are actually doing the job, it's not all the teachers, the irresponsible ones, but the ones that are really trying, is there any capacity to hear from them what they think needs to be done, whether primary, secondary, or beyond, but especially primary and secondary, to fix things? Because there was another clip that I didn't bring to show, where with regards to America, someone who came from public education, who became a governor, was lamenting the fact that, look, the teachers union there, their whole, what's their main consideration, right? It's their members, not their students. But that's one of the biggest advocacy groups that in America resist change because of the importance as a voting bloc for the politicians. And they're not advocating for the benefit of the students, they're advocating to resist change for the benefit of the teachers. Now, to what extent do we have that in tutor? Granted, compared to years ago when Talking Point Now started, the messaging from tutor has been a bit better. It's not just about our money, our money, our money, our money, our money. Sometimes we do get, workplace and working conditions into the mix. And one could argue, well, it's not their job to advocate for the students. But rarely now How am I supposed to trust teachers that don't care to advocate for the students? This is one of those professions that it's not like being an office clerk that clocks in from 9 to 5 and they just tell their manager, well, it's not in my job description. Granted, I don't expect them to sacrifice an arm and a leg, right? I don't expect them to sacrifice their well-being. I don't expect them, and they should not sacrifice their own personal finances. But I'll tell you what though, the teacher that's willing to do so, that's a teacher who I think I want to listen to. The teacher that is vehemently sticking to their job description, I don't know if I want to listen to that teacher on this and any other issue revolving that. Feel free to disagree. When we come back after the break, you can call and have your stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond
wanna
to me. Respond to me. How you would respond to me?
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful. The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
let's go to the last part.
And we're back here and talking about the WSN Content Capital. Apologies for a shortened calling segment. However, we'll go straight into it. We have our first caller for the morning, Digger Martin. You're on the line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to Talking Point.
Good morning, Sean. I'm glad to get in. But let me make it publicly known. TSTT, and I'm putting a big question mark. Have they collapsed? Why can't they fix your line properly? I mean, they say it is a disadvantage to you all. You all have talking program like me could call in, but there seems to be always a problem. But that aside, I want to talk about the Auditor General and the Minister of Finance. And I want to say, based on what I'm seeing, and I read some of the Privy Council judgment, and they're pronouncing why is the minister is not being investigated. I, as a servant, as a citizen, has been paying taxes. And I want to know how my money has been spent, how is misappropriated. And I am not too sure if the police service, the Commissioner of Police, understand that they have a duty to us as citizens to intervene and settle our anxiousness and our concern. Because if that money is misused and frittered away and put in somebody's back pocket, the next thing will happen, they will tax me to recover it. And I'm hoping that the police make a statement that they're investigating where the money gone or where the money, because that misbehavior in public office could be, or the other one, fraudulent accounting practices. So that is a serious thing, and we're treating it trivially. The other thing I want to talk about, the school, you're talking about teachers. And I basically have never thought, but I know many of my close relatives, extended family, are teachers. They came from the fraternity of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And they go backwards to help. I, for example, during the holidays, you see them doing work with the students, continue because they want to see success. But one of the biggest problems is tutor has never agitated for a functional education system, and I'm going to say it out, it has always been a party group. And the PTA, likewise. I was in a PTA, and we never joined the national NPTA because we understood how non-functional the executive. And I see one of the who has been probably a tablecloth in the PTA for the longest while in front of a joint select committee, and I sat and laughed and I said, that the young lady, when the Shoguna's primary school got 1, 2, 3, she didn't know where the school was. They had to send a man for her, and she was the president of the PTA. So I'm saying is a holistic approach, and the parents, your home environment from the first 5 years has and will be the start of molding its students. And this current government, all the early childhood centers, they have it dysfunctional. So the first 5 years of a child, and that is really a formative year, you pick up all the traits, all you have it. If your father gets up early morning and he's wearing his pants under his waist and goes for a beer, when you come back out, and when you grow up, you want to model him. The fruit does not fall far from the tree. I go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. I will say this. When I was growing up, in those years, my father was off working in Tobago, and everyone in the household got up earlier than me. And I have to admit, I am not a morning person. So I understand what they're saying, but every now and then, that's not going to be 100% accurate. I'll just say that because I'm sure there are people out there who might be saying, well, you know, I know of this one instance or this one case. That's not to say that what you said didn't have merit in a general sense, right? Because for the most part, yes, nature versus nature, but at the very least, let's not assume, well, it's in their nature anyway. No, let's try to show them a better way. And, you know, it's kind of hard to tell them to be better if you yourself are not willing to be better. So there's space on that. With regards to tutor, what I'll say is this. I can't speak with the current head of tutor. And I don't want to condemn him and lump him in with some of his predecessors. But I know one of his predecessors, TAs, can be successful, but the NPTA, and I think that is a product of our society. Think about it. How many national entities do we have that really function in any meaningful way? Right? That isn't limited to some sort of demographic, whether it's cultural, racial, or religious. What actual broad purpose national NGO body or body do we have? How many of them function properly? And to some extent, I think there are blind spots in our culture because we got complacent, because things were going great. We got all this petrodollar situation and things easy. Why you and we have the culture, the behavior of, oh God, those sweaty small stuff is all right. But the problem is, your individual life, those sweaty small stuff is fine because one, that's all on you. That'll only mainly affect you. Yeah, you might have a family, it might affect your family, but the point is, it's limited, right? When you get to the national level, you can't not sweat the small stuff because everything is, your foundation is built on a lot of small things. And if you don't know how to run it properly, and if you want to treat it like if you're treating some little, you can't run a national organization like how you would run your personal little rum shop on the corner. or your little convenience store, or your little small business that you may or may not care about. Anyway, I was going to say something else, but the thing is, with regards to the Auditor General situation and what the Privy Council said, similar to the stigma of, well, there's a stigma for vocational schools and jobs, right? We spoke about that yesterday. We need to get that, we need to let that go. They don't have that stigma in certain countries in Europe that are big economies. That not just with regards to size, but how they function, we would like to get a little bit of that down here, right? We ain't gonna be as big as them because, you know, we physically can't be, we don't have the population size or the land space. But with regards to how they operate, we would like to maybe import some of that, not just some of the nonsense that we do from social media abroad. But I digress. There's a stigma, I think, with regards to investigations, and this might be universal around the world. An investigation is done in order to catch the bad guys. It's not just done to catch the bad guys, folks. If you didn't commit a murder, but for whatever reason, the police have reasonable grounds to suspect you, maybe an eyewitness mistook you for the murderer, what have you, the investigation isn't meant to just lock you away because you're innocent. The investigation is meant to clear you when they investigate you. Now the question is, with regards to the Minister of Finance, does he not understand this? The entire situation, like what I said with the situation with the Lisa Morris Julian fire, everything needs to be investigated. No stone unturned, and that includes the Minister of Finance, regardless of how much he wants to say I was involved or I wasn't involved, because he seemed to be far more involved than what his statement would imply, right? He seems to be the expert on a situation that he's not involved with. I wonder how he knows more than anybody what went down, but he wasn't involved in any way. Regardless, he is the person in charge of the ministry. He should be investigated because it's either to see if he did anything wrong or not. And if he didn't, the investigation clears him. So then the question I have to ask is, if politicians in general don't seem to understand that, what in their background has it in their experience investigations are only a bad thing? I understand it might seem a bit naive for me, but I'm sorry, I'm working under principle, not under the practical reality of the cesspool that we find ourselves in because we fester doing the wrong thing with regards to corruption all the time. We have Move on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on here. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
Sean, I realize more and more you are reaching to the point that I continue to raise over and over again. This country has never been run properly. You cannot run a country like a parlor.
Yeah.
Canadians have gotten accustomed to mediocrity and dysfunction. And you know, one of the things that disturbs me greatly when I hear people, educated people, right, especially those people coming out of UWI, advocating for us to go to the CCJ because we have to take over our own, we must run our own affairs. Why we keep saying this foolishness when none of our institutions, which we have been running for ourselves since '56, are running properly? I can't understand that reasoning with people. It comes the same way with this coat of arms nonsense. I have heard elitist people, I want to call them, the educated elite, many of them, professors, making the comment that, yeah, it's changing the coat of arms, putting the pandemic is long overdue. What nonsense? What is long overdue in Trinidad is our institutions must work. We must run this country with law and order. I don't see how people could make such a statement and not realize that they're speaking nonsense. I am 71 years old. I am ashamed of my country. You know, I love my country, but I'm ashamed of this country, what passes for governance, what passes for law and order. I see these TTPS ambassadors coming there on different programs, yours included, and talking all this gibberish, giving all statistics, but the police in Trinidad was failing. I mean, it is clear, Stevie Wonder could see that. And yet we're going on with this deceit and this nonsense. This country needs a shake-up, you know, and to say, you know, the underlying lie, Sean, And I think a lot of us, we are trapped by it because we're not honest and courageous. There is no way that Trinidad and Tobago could have reached the state we have reached if that first leader we had for the 30 years was really a great leader, as they keep saying. Great scholar, yes. But our problem started with him. But we continue this lie, continue perpetuating this lie, how great this man was. He could never have been great. Why is it all the areas that always supported him and his party are in the mess there? Somebody needs to answer that question. I would like to hear you bring a criminologist, right? Or one of these political scientists, and let them discuss that issue. Thank you. Over and out.
Thank you, caller. I will say this. You could come to that conclusion without vilifying Dr. Eric Williams. Not saying that you're wrong to do so. I'm not debating whether you're right or wrong on that point. I'm just saying, for those people that might want to disagree with you because they don't see Dr. Eric Williams as a negative, Mova's point is still valid because we said it yesterday. Even if you agree with things that Dr. Eric Williams did, he did those things for that time, whether they were good or bad. And to some extent, we've been trapped in the precedents of that time period, and we haven't gotten out of it. And even if they were good precedents, the world moved on, and we're in 2025. And what have we updated to meet the needs of 2025? There's more I want to respond to Mova, but we have Sanford on the line. Last caller, good morning, caller, you're on here.
Hi, good morning, Sean.
Morning.
It is hard to listen to Mova and his comments. Let me tell you why. Sometimes the truth is really hard to listen to. A lot of what Mova said there is our problem in this country. There seems to be no form of accountability. As you said, that clip that you played with that gentleman, there seems to be no accountability. Nobody seems to want to be responsible or accountable. And you're wondering, when will we see that without starting to become accountable, we are spiraling down this whirlpool down to the bottom. And Trinidad and Tobago is they're not understanding this. I listened to those to the joint select with the when they were talking yesterday, when they were talking about the lessons. And that's another example of how the system was allowed to reach where it reached. This started with textbooks when they started to introduce local authors. And next thing you know, there was a proliferation of textbooks, and the textbooks changing every year and every 2 years. And then the lessons thing started, and the lessons thing has gone. It is now the lessons is now part of the education system, Sean. It is now it's part and parcel of the system where parents have to find the money. A lot of parents, it's not about only well-to-do parents. A lot of other parents have to find the money from primary school level. From primary school level, they started this stupidness with lessons. And I'm not saying that lessons will not be required in some instances where you have some children that need a little extra, but now it has been institutionalized, and now they are, and I dare anybody to say to tell me, there are teachers that have become millionaires from lessons in this country, millionaires from lessons in this country.
Yeah.
Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. I'll say this. I was never in a situation where my teacher required me to go to lessons. It was a rare thing that happened. I think in primary school it was more, well, your parent needed you to be at lessons. Right? Or in my case, it was my parent needed to ensure that my homework was done. My mother needed to ensure that my homework was done, but also it was a way to, keep the child until 4 o'clock, and then child comes home and everything is fine, and You know, when I was in primary school, my lessons class was a very small subsection of the class. The teacher didn't do anything to cause to basically to pad their after school lessons class. And similar in secondary school, right? I only really went to lessons in secondary school for ad maths and for French because, yeah, at some point that's just not in my wheelhouse. So it was what it was, right? It did the job, it got me a passing grade. It was what it was. But to say that I needed lessons to get everything done in order to not fail everything, no. And it's not like most of the guys in my classes for those subjects were in lessons. No. So, yeah, I think there's no political will to deal with it because, as you pointed out, that's basically unofficially part of their salary now. And they don't want to do anything about that. It's similar to the public transportation system. If we actually fix the public transportation system, oh my gosh, you put so many maxis and taxis in the business. Again, not all of them own the vehicles they're driving. They could get a job in a public transportation system, but part of it is also there's no political will to have a proper public transportation system because I genuinely believe nobody knows how to do it. Nobody knows how to maintain vehicles and to operate something properly. The only institution that seems to be able to at least operate something properly is CAL. And even then, they don't always make money. But at the very least, they operate, right? Back to the incident that did not lead to the loss of life. In a jurisdiction like ours, if we were careless and complacent there, how many airline accidents we could have easily had, given the track record of the rest of our society? Think about that. Now, I'll say this to close. I am not necessarily ashamed of my country. Because for better ways, I have paid attention to what goes on outside of our borders. And there's a lot of ways. And we're not just talking about countries that look a lot worse than us. Countries that are supposed to be better than us. And I'll use these examples. Maybe not so much Canada anymore, but I've yet to see where their political culture, how it changes as the new administration comes in, right? We've yet to see that. But the United States and the United Kingdom, I have seen things, particularly more recently with the United Kingdom, believe it or not. If I was living in that country, that would make me ashamed because of how blatantly over-the-top ridiculous some of the things I've seen there. And I'm actually talking about the police in the United Kingdom and some of the ridiculous things that they have done that will make what we have done seem almost reasonable, a lot of the things that happen here. In comparison, at least we could understand it. So I'm not ashamed of TNT, but just because we don't look as bad as other places doesn't mean it's good. I said that earlier. Just because we're better than doesn't mean it's good. We could still be bad. So I'm not ashamed of TNT, but I am sad. And I've expressed this before, and I don't want to go into it all over again, but it's one of the reasons why it's only within the last couple of years. And look, it's not as though when I was here, I had some great career making money hand over fist and profiting from this, that, and the other. No. I was struggling to find my way through the world just like any other idiot that didn't know what he was doing. And even with that, I never had the regret of, I should have gone abroad. I would have been able to find better opportunities. I would have been able to have a greater variety of options, and maybe I could have found what I was meant to do abroad a lot easier than down here. I never had that thought. I never thought about the opportunity cost of not going away. And then in the last year or two, now I've been thinking, did I make a mistake? Because where are we going? I'm not ashamed by the country, but I am sad for it. Because even if I did go away, or even if I could go away in the future, what about the people that can't? One of the things about a brain drain, right? One of the evil sides of it is the people that we need to help solve our problems here, they are taking the golden parachute and going out. They are taking the escape route, the secret tunnel, the get out of jail free card, and they're going. The best and brightest leave. Who do you want to run a country? Not your best and brightest? There's one reason why I didn't completely agree with the caller from over, and that's because to some extent I was speaking, I had the fortunate opportunity to meet personally Mr. Rafiq Shah and hear some of his experiences. And where we were then was not as bad as where we are now. Now, maybe you could say that Dr. Eric Williams set a lot of bad precedents that led us to this point, that we followed and over-indexed, or maybe it was because people after him were even worse, whether he was good or bad. But back then, the 70s and 80s, the public service was not what it was now. The police service was not what it was now. The teaching service was not what it was now. The society was not what it was now. And I hated this cliche to some extent, and I thought it was mainly a nostalgia thing. But that song, Bring Back the Old Time Days, the meaning of those lyrics now are far greater than what it was when it was written and published and presented to the public and given to the world. But still, I'm not ashamed, I'm just sad. Now the question is, how long could I stay at it? And how many people could I encourage to join those of us who want to try in whatever capacity before it gets too depressing and we all start to give up? And then what will happen to this country? I have lived nowhere else my entire life. I don't know how to live anywhere else. I don't want to have to learn. But to some extent, we all agree there's a problem. Why are we not willing to try to fix it? That is one of the greatest ironies of the human condition. Most of our problems are technically created by ourselves. Hopefully we could make today a good day, as Mr. Shah would say. But even if you can't, still remember your allegiance to each other and to this republic. Still try to be nice, because it's nice to be nice. Stay safe, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.